If you look in front of you, you will find the home of the legendary Tata Nelson Madiba Mandela. This is his home. You cannot quite see beyond the trees, but this is his home. His home is in Qunu. In the later life, Mandela built this home, and it is considered his retirement home in Qunu, and it became his final resting place after his death in 2013. All of this, you can see, they're not really homes built next to it, so that the Mandela family could get some privacy, because he is or was the first black democratic president of the country. And yes, this is still his land. It's very huge, and the neighbors are very, very much far away. We're still driving in his land, the home of Tata Mandela. There is the house over there. If you look between those trees back there. Anyway, in today's video, I will be giving you a virtual tour of the home village of the late black democratic first president of South Africa. He became president in 1994, and his name is Nelson Madiba Mandela. I'm gonna be giving you a virtual tour of where he grew up and spent the majority of his life, and then was later laid to rest. Now, where do we even begin? Well, perhaps we should start with his names, because your names say a lot about you, your destiny, and who you are as a human being. As we're driving through Qunu, masibe sithetha ngaye ke utatomkhulu. The first name, Rolihlahla. This is his birth name, his first name that was given to him by his parents. And ukuhola ihlahla is when you're holding a tree branch over your shoulders. Uhola ihlahla, you're dragging it as you're carrying it over your shoulders. Uhola ihlahla, because ihlahla is a branch and ukuhola is to drag something along. And others believe that this name was actually a prophecy, because that's what he ended up doing by carrying the nation, carrying South Africa to democracy. That is birth-given name, Rolihlahla. And then after that, his second name, Nelson, which is the most famous name, Nelson. You might know him as Nelson Mandela, but Nelson is not a name that he got from his family. Well, let's talk more about that. So Nelson was born in Mvezo around 1918, which is a neighboring village not far away from Qunu. And then around 1925, he moved to Qunu, and that's when he went to school. And then on his first day of school, his teacher asked him, Nelson, what's your name? And then he said, my name is Kholihlahla. That was the name given to him by his parents. And then the teacher said, no, I mean your colonial name, your name of oppression, because at that time it was mandatory that each and every single South African have an English name. So Nelson said, I don't have a colonial name, the name of oppression. I don't have it. My name is Kholihlahla, which is a name you probably would have known him as if it was not mandatory for people to have names of oppression from the colonizers. The colonizers couldn't pronounce names like Kholihlahla, Nomcebo, Qaqamba, Ngobile. So you might find people with two names. For example, we might have Ngobile, Hope, and then their last name, because the colonizers couldn't say Ngobile. They had to find a way of enforcing it into people, native South Africans, to have an English name or a name that is not native to South Africa that they could use. For example, you might have Qaqamba Elizabeth and then their last name. So Kholihlahla said, I do not have a colonial name. He grew up in a royal family after all, so they didn't really pay much attention to such things. So at school, the teacher said, it is mandatory for you to have this colonial name. Since you don't have one, I'm gonna name you Nelson. From today onwards, your name is Nelson. And that's how Kholihlahla got the name Nelson. So now, you know the two names, Kholihlahla, Nelson. His third name is Dalibunga. Dalibunga. Dalibunga is a name that was given to him when he was transitioning into manhood. Ukwaluk entabeni bambiza Dalibunga. Dalibunga. Okay, now you have three names. The one where he was transitioning into manhood, Dalibunga. The one that was given to him at school, Nelson. And his birth given name, Kholihlahla. What other name does he have? Madiba. Madiba. Madiba is his clan name. For example, I am Siviwe. Siviwe Tolugazi, or you can say Siviwe Tolugazi Mamchenge. I don't use Mamchenge with you guys because I know you might not be able to pronounce the C click, but I am Mamchenge. Mamchenge is my clan name. So, Nelson Kholihlahla Dalibunga Madiba, and then Mandela is his last name. So, he was born in 1918, and then he moved to this place, Qunu, in 1925. And then around 1930, he was sent to live in the Tembu Great Place under the regent of Jongintaba. Jongintaba. We're going to talk more about that. And then when he was sent there, he was meant to take after his father's position as the chief in the Jongintaba clan. But he didn't want to do that. He didn't really felt like that was his destiny. So, but still, he was sent there to live in the great place under the regent of Jongintaba so that he could take after his, father's position as chief. And around 1941, he was like, this is not for me. And they tried to groom him for that position. And then, when you grow up in a royal family, and not just royal families per se, but in Africa or in other cultures and countries as well, they would have arranged marriage for you back in the day. So they had an arranged marriage for him, and he was set for this position. And then in 1941, he fled to Johannesburg in order to avoid arranged marriage. He was like, deuces, I'm out of here. I want to choose my own wife. I don't want this. So a few years later, about like 3-4 years after moving to Johannesburg, he joined the African National Congress. And then within the same year of joining the African Congress, he co-founded the African National Congress Youth League. And that was in 1944. And the rest was history. And then he was later buried here in Qunu in 2013. So let's just talk more about Qunu. Qunu is a village that is famous for being a place where Nelson Mandela grew up after his father was deposed as chief, and then the family moved, or at least was forced to move from Mvezo. That's where Mvezo, they stayed up until the ages of between 5 and 7. They stayed in Mvezo because the father was the chief, and then when he stopped being chief, they were forced to move from Mvezo. And then this is now his true childhood home, because he moved here when he was still a very young boy, and he would head cattle here and then play stick fetching games with his friends. It's basically where he absorbed the Xhosa way of life. Later in life, Mandela just moved back here, and then after his death in 2013, he instructed the family that this is where he wants to be buried. And then he was later laid to rest in this place, Qunu. That's why this place is very much famous, being the birthplace of Nelson Mandela. So after leaving, being groomed to be the next chief, and then fleeing to Johannesburg, what did he do exactly in Johannesburg, you may wonder? Well, he worked in a mine as a security clerk, and then he was later introduced to Walter Sisulu. He was introduced to Walter Sisulu, a man called Walter Sisulu. And then Walter Sisulu helped Nelson Mandela by getting him a job to work in a law firm. We're going to talk more about Walter Sisulu a bit later on in this video. Not talk about him, but just showcase things named after him. Walter Sisulu was, or is, a historic figure who played a huge role in fighting for democracy when it comes to the betterment of Black South African lives. So he helped Nelson Tata Madiba get a job in a law firm. Okay, so through Walter Sisulu. He met leading activists and was exposed to the harsh realities of apartheid. And in Johannesburg, apartheid was highly prominent because that's where the mines are, and at the same time, people are leaving villages to go to Johannesburg in order to get a better life. You know what I mean? So to work in the mines, that was the most prominent, place to work. But everything was booming. Basically, everything was booming in Johannesburg, and then hence it was called the land of opportunities, eGoli, Uqonda. After that, the poverty and injustice he witnessed amongst black South Africans in Joburg, radicalized his thinking. He was like, no, man, this is home. This is our land. And more especially coming from a royal family in one way or another, he's like, this is our land. This is not how people should be treated in our homes. This is not how people should be treated in their homelands. There's too much injustice happening here, and things shouldn't be this way. So that's when he was like, there needs to be change. There needs to be change. And around that time, there was a lady called Winnie Madikizela Mandela, who was dating a different guy. This guy she was dating was also like a black South African, but this guy was terrified of the colonizers. He was just their puppet, basically. He was just their puppet. Every time they asked him jump, he would ask how high. And Winnie was the opposite. She was just like the same as Nelson Mandela, and she also left the Eastern Cape to go to Johannesburg. And I made a video about Winnie Mandela. You should just check it out. I made a live video about her. She lived a very, very interesting life, for lack of better words. You should check it out. And then as she was dating this guy, she was like, I cannot date a coward. It's over. So she broke up with that guy. Shortly after breaking up with him, she then met Nelson Mandela. And then the rest was history. Winnie Madikizela Mandela, the wife of Nelson Talibunga Madiba Mandela. Together they fought for democracy, for the betterment of the lives of black South Africans. So, in 1944, Nelson Mandela joined the African National Congress, otherwise referred to as the ANC. And then within the same year, he had the Youth League. And then the Youth League pushed for a more radical and mass-based resistance against apartheid. So yeah, that is pretty interesting. Mandela has never officially inherited his father's chieftaincy, and a lot of people commend him for going to Johannesburg and leaving the life of being a chief, and having a better way of life as compared to other people in terms of oppressions and whatnot, because in some way or another you have some power within the village because you're the chief, you know what I mean? So he forfeited that and put his life on the line, but at the same time he was running away from an arranged marriage, so a lot of people commend him for that, risking and putting his life on the line by joining the African National Congress. And at that time he was around the age of 23, and he did not just live by himself. He and his cousin's name was Justice. Him and Justice ran away from Kyalaga. Kyalaga is the great place. Kyalaga where they lived under the regent Jongintaba Dalindyebo, who was, raising them for the leadership roles. So they were being, groomed there by Jongintaba Dalindyebo. Jongintaba Dalindyebo. Mandela later said that he didn't want to be confined to a life of tribal custom and privilege, and instead sought freedom in the broader sense, if that makes sense, any sense. So, what else can we talk about when it comes to Mandela? There's so much to talk about. In terms of siblings, Nelson Mandela had 13 siblings. He was one of 13 children to his father. So his father married a couple of wives. So in our culture, it was very common for people to have multiple wives, not just one. And the act of doing that is called isitembu. Isitembu. Fumane isitembu, just, extra wife. But there are rules and regulations to going about it, going a second or a third or a fourth wife. So his father had 4 wives. So he was the firstborn son to his mother, and also the firstborn child to his mother. His mother's name was Nosegeleni Fani. And his father's name was Kahla. So Mandela's mother, Nosegeleni, was the 3rd wife of Ukahla, who is Mandela's father. And so Kahla had 4 wives. Then he also had 4 sons in his mother's line. So Mandela was the only surviving boy, unfortunately. And he did have half siblings from his father's, other marriages. And the act of having multiple wives, like I've mentioned, is called isitembu. And I said that there are rules and regulations to follow. That thing is still being practiced even nowadays. There is an actual TV show, reality show in South Africa called isitembu, and a lot of South Africans are obsessed with that show. I've never seen it, and it's not my cup of coffee. So they showcase, a guy who keeps marrying people. At the time of having that show, I think he had 2 wives, and he was in the process of getting a 3rd wife. But now, I think he now has like 5 or 6 wives. I'm not sure. I don't watch the show, so don't take my word for it. It's called the Sitembu. So in terms of rules and regulations you need to follow, is that you need to make sure that before you get a 2nd wife, you can't just say, hey, first wife, here's a 2nd wife. Like that's not how you do it. Before getting a 2nd wife, you go to your first wife and seek permission to get another wife. And if she says yes, and only then you can have a 2nd wife. But if she says no, unfortunately, you can't get a 2nd wife. You have to have permission from her to get a 2nd wife. But nowadays, let me just scratch my head. It's itchy. But nowadays, people don't really follow those rules. Whether our wife approves or not, they just get the 2nd wife. They said, if you want to leave, you can leave. If you want to stay, you can stay. But back in the day, it was mandatory that the other wives agreed to you. So now if you have 2 wives, before getting a 3rd wife or a 5th or 100th wife, you have to ask the currently existing wives for permission before you move forward with it. And there are other rules as well. I'm not familiar with them, that you need to follow. But seeking permission is one of the most important things that you need to do before you get another wife or so. And that's pretty much it. So Mandela's father, Urkahla, had 13 wives, including Nosegeleni, who's the 3rd, Mandela's mother. So, first question you wonder, is Nelson Mandela from a royal family? Yes, he is from the Tembu royal lineage, the counselor class. The counselor class, though. So in terms of title or role, he was groomed to be chief or the advisor in the royal family. And then after that, in terms of biological mother, Nosegelini Fani, siblings around 13 from multiple wives. And then full siblings, he had few. Mandela was the only son from his mother. And then in terms of birth order, he's the first born son and the only surviving boy. Now, let's talk about the royal background. So, Mandela was born Rolihlahla Mandela. It would be so interesting to see if people in the rest of the world would have been able to pronounce Rolihlahla if people were not given, colonial names, the names of oppression. Rolihlahla Mandela. Are you able to pronounce that? I think the R click is the most easy to pronounce, followed by the C click. For example, I'm Mamtenge. Can you pronounce that? Mamtenge. And then my father is Mtenge. And then my uncles from my father's side, Mtenge. But Rolihlahla is Madiba. So on the 18th of July in 1918, that's where he was born, in Mvezo, within the Eastern Cape province of South Africa. And then his father, Gadla Maphakanyiswa. But you're probably wondering if people were given names of oppression, what was his father's name of oppression, like his colonial name? Well, Ugadla's name was Henry. So his full name is Gadla Henry Maphakanyiswa. Gadla Henry Maphakanyiswa. If you don't want to call him Gadla, you probably would have called him Henry. He probably is known as Henry because it's his name of oppression, which is easy for everybody else to pronounce, unlike Gadla. But Gadla is very easy. And he was the chief and the counselor to the Tembu king. So Mandela was not in direct line to become king, but he was groomed to be a royal advisor or a chief, possibly to inherit his father's position within the traditional leadership structure. Just to put that out there. So after his father's death, Mandela was placed under the guardianship of Chief Jongintaba Dalindyebo, the acting regent to the Tembu people, which further aligned him with royal circles and leadership training. So yeah, that is Nelson Mandela. Why did I say Madikizela? Like in my mind, I'm thinking about Winnie Madikizela Mandela. And speaking of Winnie Madikizela Mandela, Winnie had such a fascinating life, just like Nelson did. And it is a powerful life and legacy that they have left. So they decided to make a movie about Winnie Madikizela Mandela. But guess what? They decided to cast an American actress and singer who is now having her own talk show, and that is Jennifer Hudson. Jennifer Hudson can sing. I mean, she has the most powerful voice ever. And she can also act because Dreamgirls, she did that. She killed that role. She won awards for that role. She was amazing in Dreamgirls. She was powerful, and guess what? She could resonate with the characters. The character she was playing in one way or another, because it's a black American lady, a singer, undergoing certain levels of struggles that she is familiar with. And now she was cast to play a Xhosa woman who was born and raised in the Eastern Cape and lived the life of oppression under the apartheid regime in South Africa. I love Jennifer, but she had no business playing Winnie Madikizela Mandela. And the internet was livid. South Africans were not happy about that. They were like, why? Just why? We have many amazing South African actresses who resonate with Winnie Mandela, and they could have played this role far above and beyond what Jennifer Hudson did. Why is she playing Winnie Mandela? It doesn't make any sense. That's what everybody was saying. There's that acting, is it called improv acting? I don't know, where you tap into that person when you're acting their character. You tap into them and live as them. And sometimes people go to live in that place and see their way of life, and so that they could play the character to the T because they're familiar with it. So Jennifer Hudson knew nothing about life in South Africa. She knew nothing about the Xhosa culture. She knew nothing about like the nitty gritty struggles that being just a Xhosa woman, being a South African, black South African is like. So people were not happy about that. And one thing I'm going to say, that the internet is not happy, and trust and best believe if they would have cast a South African actress for that role, it would have won awards. Because guess what, there is some level. That's why people do that acting where they tap into the character, just like the guy who played the Joker, because there's some level of connecting with the character that you're playing when you know about it and you have some level of connection with it. I don't know how to put it. Hence she was able to play that role that she played and won Oscars for that role that she played in Dreamgirls, because she connected with it to some degree, because she has connection with that life. You know what I mean? Which if you would have casted an African who has never been or lived that life as a black American, would have never been able to tap into. But one of the most obvious things that people were not happy about was her accent. Oh my goodness. There is an African accent that you're most likely to find in movies about Africa. It's always the same accent. And if you're not African, you're not gonna know this maybe. But South Africans have a different accent from Nigerians, who have a different accent from Kenyans, who have a different accent from many other regions within Africa. So Africans have different accents. And then there's that accent that it's made, Africans believe it's a caricature accent, when people use that same accent for all Africans. And that's, so she was using a different accent which sounded nothing, absolutely nothing like Winnie Madikizela Mandela. And it was just like, that movie felt wrong. It felt horrible. She was using a different accent. There was no connection. It was horrible. It kind of reminds me of when I was watching Viola Davis when she was playing the First Lady, Michelle Obama. you cannot take away the fact that Viola Davis is an amazing actress. She's amazing. But when she played Michelle Obama and she was doing the things with her lips, and it just looked caricature. Like it just felt wrong. Like it just there was something distasteful about it. That's how many like Africans feel about people who are not Africans making movies about Africans, because it's caricature and stereotypical. It's just not it. It's not true demonstration of how it is. So that's how people felt about it with Jennifer Hudson. Oh my god, that movie, let's just stop talking about it. It was horrible. That's all you can say. I can say I love me some Jennifer. She is amazing, but honestly, sometimes the harsh truth has to be said. She had no business playing Winnie Mandela. Okay. Now, they also made movies, a couple of movies about Nelson Mandela. Guess what? One of the movies that they made about Mandela was played by an American actor. I don't know his name, but he's an amazing actor. I know him. He's an amazing actor. He did the role justice in terms of acting, but in terms of accent and how Mandela is as a human being, he was not able to portray that. And after that, recently, they casted Idris Elba to play Nelson Mandela. Oh my god, I'm not laughing. South Africans were not happy. They were not happy. Like, he received mixed like reviews. Other people were happy with how he tried to do Mandela, but others were like, why? There's so many different South African actors, Xhosa actors, who would have played Mandela to the T, including his mannerisms. Why Idris? We know and understand he's an award-winning actor and all, but we have people in South Africa who would have done that role justice. But anyway, it's just interesting to find such things. And portrayal of Africa in movies is something that's always talked about, and Africans are not happy about how Africa is being portrayed in movies, and everything is just caricature and stereotypical. And let me just make an example using a recent movie, Coming to America. You've all have seen Coming to America, right? And Eddie Murphy, perfect, killed the role. Everything was amazing, everything was cool. And they did Coming to America 2. In Coming to America 2, they casted a lady to play the princess, or Eddie Murphy's son's love interest. And the lady they casted as that role is a very famous South African actress. She's done amazing work in South Africa. She's famous for being in soapies, movies and shows in South Africa, and she plays amazing. She's an award-winning actress and producer. Recently, she did Shaka Ilembe. To learn more about the life of Shaka Zulu, the Zulu king, and how he lived and all that, check out Shaka Ilembe. So now she produced Shaka Ilembe, and then she played Queen Nomzamo in Shaka Ilembe. Queen Nandi in Shaka Ilembe. And her name is Nomzamo Mbata. Nomzamo Mbata was casted in Coming to America 2. So we heard about it, that she's going to be coming to America too. So a lot of South Africans were like, we're going to see American movie, Nomzamo Mbata in an American movie. So it was made a big deal. And then we were all excited to see Nomzamo Mbata. And we were familiar with her acting skills, you know, she's amazing. And then she opened her mouth. And South Africans were like, what is happening? Why is Nomzamo talking like that? Why is she speaking like that? You know, the accent that the actors in America use when they're doing African movies, that same caricature accent. She was told to use that accent. How do you ask a South African, an African, to star in your movie as an African? And then they start speaking using their African accent. And then you say, no, that accent is not good enough. Like, that accent does not sound African to us. You need to make it sound African. What does that even mean? So she was told that her accent doesn't sound African, so she needs to change her accent to be African. And then they use that caricature accent that they always portray for Africans. And everybody was like, but she's African. She has an African accent. She should have played the role using her true African accent, not the caricature, accent. What is happening? So that was quite interesting. And there was an article that I once read about Eddie Murphy where he was saying that every time they would film movies and use African accent, they would use that accent that you see in movies, right? So then he decided to come to Africa and then realized that the accent that he used is way far off to how people sound in Africa where he visited, which was quite interesting. So, fun fact, not all Africans sound the same. Different countries have different accents, and at times different tribes have different accents, and you can't tell somebody that they don't sound African, yet people from that same country as them sound like them, and then they're using their accents. So yeah, I just wanted to just throw that in there. We learn a thing or two every now and then. And yeah, it's interesting. What more can I talk about? Nelson Mandela. I don't know what to do or what to talk about. Anyway, am I forgetting something about Mandela? Oh yeah, there's one thing about Mandela that was very controversial. His prison number was 4664. 4 and then a 666 and then another 4. 666, Illuminati and whatnot, blah blah blah. And then there's always those conspiracies that Mandela had a sit down with the elites, the colonizers, had a sit down with them, and they're like, what? This is what is going to happen. You guys are fighting, for your democracy and whatnot. Yeah, we're just gonna act like you've gotten your democracy. We're gonna keep the land, gonna keep the wealth for ourselves, but we're gonna say you guys are free and whatnot. You're gonna get your democracy, you're gonna have access to places and whatnot, but things continue the way they are with whatever it is that we've stolen. We keep, and then you guys can continue to live your lives. Is that okay? So now we say freedom has been granted, you're free, oppression is gone and whatnot, but certain privileges we're still gonna keep to ourselves. Are you okay with that? Because you, on the other hand, you're just gonna be in the upper class like us, and you're gonna be part of history. They're gonna write books about you. You're gonna have your own just like history, and becoming the first black president of South Africa. Don't you want that? So agree to these terms and conditions to us, but we'll still keep the power though. But we're gonna pretend like you do guys have the power. Do you agree to that? So that people who believe that is what Nelson Mandela did, and you guys know about the 666, Illuminati and whatnot. So having this number, and he would also have it on a cap. He would wear caps, and I'm not sure if there's anything like an organization or something named after that with 4664, but it was his prison number. That's just a random thing that came into mind in terms of controversies and whatnot. And why was it 46664, you may wonder? When he was in prison, his prison number in Robben Island. Well, when he got into Robben Island, he was given 466 as his prison number, and then he went to prison in 1964. So then they mixed those together, 46664, and that's how they call it. They didn't call it 46664. They call it 46664. 46664. That's what they call it. And a lot of people are like, wait a minute, why is his prison number the name of the beast and whatnot? But anyway, that's a story for another day. I don't know. And over here, you're seeing a university. Now we're in town, and this is a university over there. I was busy talking about the Illuminati thing, I forgot. But back there is a university. That university is called Walter Sisulu University. Walter Sisulu University, and that is the university named after Walter Sisulu, the guy who Nelson Mandela met up with when he arrived in Joburg, and then he gave him a job in a law firm. So there's a university named after him, Walter Sisulu University, Ewusu. It has different places all over the Eastern Cape. There's one here and then other places as well. It's quite common, and it has a lot of strikes. There's a lot of strikes, and most people look down on it because there's always a strike every week. Kids are not learning. I mean, they are learning, but there are complaints that they're always striking for something, but it has a lot of political leaders who graduated from it. Actually, back in the day, one of the prestigious universities ever in South Africa, but over the years it has slowly deteriorated in terms of people considering it to have high quality education, which is super unfortunate. That was the university, Walter Sisulu. And Mandela also studied here, if I recall. He studied at quite a different universities. He studied at Walter Sisulu University. He also studied at the University of Forte, and he also studied at the University of Johannesburg, etc. So he did quite study in a lot of universities. And when I was studying the video, you didn't quite get to see the home from the different side. So that all of this is Nelson Mandela's yard. All of it in Qunu. All of it. This is it. No neighbors close by. And then where you're seeing the trees start, that's where his house is now. And then it's a gated community. And now we're about to see the entrance. There's the entrance, the gate, where you'd find the security guard for you in order to get in order if you're a family. And that's the end of it. You can see the roof over there in between the trees. It's quite big, and then these are the first neighbors from him. So I just wanted to have a different angle that I can show you of where Nelson Mandela grew up, Qunu. And this is where he was later laid to rest. I think what you've learned about Nelson Mandela is a mouthful, and now it is time for me to head home. Okay, I am done visually demonstrating everything for you, and I'm super tired. And as you can see, after arriving, getting off the bus, just lose the loo to be, and then go home. And that's me saying peace out, y'all, peace out. But I'm wearing my cap because I didn't sleep all night, because I was in an overnight bus to showcase to you what Nelson Mandela's home looks like. Okay, let me go. Thank you very much for watching today's video, and hopefully I didn't say anything offensive. This is made for educational content and to just showcase some of the grievances that Africans have when it comes to representation as well. And hopefully you learned a thing or two and you were also not offended by what you learned, because sometimes the truth might be harsh, but I tried my best to say it in the nicest possible way. And that is going to be it for today's video. Man go to okay, but before I go to okay, the word of the day. Do you want to perhaps see it? And here is our word of the day for this week. Nilale kakuhle, niphole kakuhle, nizole kakuhle, ndinithanda nonke emakhaya. Bye bye.